Okay, start. Okay, so we left before the break discussing HTML. Let's see an example before going on and talking about CSS, etc. Okay? So, Visual Studio Code, as usual, week 04, you already find the files. Okay? So, there is this page V1, okay? It is very simple HTML code. Oh, let me just stop the old program. Okay. Very simple HTML code. You see the doc type, HTML, head and body, so the two sections. I think you can even close them. The other is of Visual Studio Code is nice in this sense. Okay? Body, H1, so title, and then a table. Date, text, auto, score, and so on, table row, date, etc. So it's our application that we will show a table with the answer to a certain question. Very, very, so it's really a draft now, okay? How do I check how you can, if the HTML code is correct, and how can I visualize the HTML? Just open the browser, right? And just use the folder. The folder is this home, Enrico, etc. So copy paste, and let me paste it. If you paste it in the URL bar, the browser basically goes, well, the directory, if it's an HTML file, it shows it. Oops, it's the wrong directory, sorry. Okay, so HTML, CSS, page 1, okay? So, that's our HTML. Again, open the inspector. You see our HTML here. Nice thing here inside the browser is that you can touch elements and they get highlighted in the window. Okay, so you know which part is what, the table, the row, the other row, the single element, and so on. And it works also in the other way. So if you click here, so this picker, you touch an element, it gets highlighted in the HTML. So you have a way of debugging HTML and understand what's happening in any website, okay? Of course, our is very simple now, but you like the Politecnico Torino website, provided that you like it really. Okay, you click it, that's the logo, okay? EMG, class, etc. Source, that's the URL, okay? You can even get the URL, I think, just to play a little bit. Edit as HTML, so I can, no. I wanted to copy paste. Why does it? Okay, you take it. Okay, if the server allows you to do it, well, that's the URL inside the same, of course, host name. Okay, that's the logo, right? You can more or less extract whatever you want from any website. Okay. Sometimes they do some tricks, so they are not really images. What you see as others is not so easy sometimes. But I mean, just to show you that, I mean, you are able to inspect any HTML anywhere, any website, and so on. It's stuff that is on your computer. It's inside the browser. It has already been parsed. It has already been made available by the browser in the form of something that is shown there. So it's really easy to inspect. Okay? And even to modify. You can even modify it. Okay? You don't like Ateneo. Okay? I don't know. It's even title Ateneo. Ateneo 2, okay? No, it's not title, so it's something else that is shown. I'm just guessing, so probably it's not so good. It's here, right? Edit, I guess title was an element. Ateneo 2. No? So maybe it's an image, I don't know. Yes, Ateneo 2. Okay, you can even play and modify your HTML or anybody's HTML. Of course, you are not modifying the server. Any other client accessing the web server of the Politecnico gets the original HTML. But this is stuff which is local in your computer, okay, in your browser. So you can even play with it, okay, just to see and modify something just for practicing, actually, because modifying stuff that is already on your computer is typically useless, right? You already have it. You already got it from the server. Okay, good. So you see, it's very easy to write, and you just need a little bit of practice, right? So just identify the correct HTML tag and use it, okay? Heap overrun, where does the title go? The title go here, okay? The heap overrun, it's a metadata, so it's not shown, it goes wherever it needs to go, okay? Title typically on the bar, on the tab, and other things, typically other things are keywords for search engines or importing CSS and other stuff that you don't need to see, okay? Good. So let's talk about the CSS now. So unless you have questions, okay? A lot of slides, we are not going to stop on all the slides, okay? Because it's too long, but you have them as a reference, and most of them also talk about something which is not so much used anymore today, so older ways of positioning and stuff like that. CSS stands for cascading style sheet, so here they put a waterfall, my colleagues, which makes more jokes than me. We will see why cascading style sheet. But style sheet, I think it's a general concept, right? It's a description of how things should appear, depending on some information you get from each element. So typically their type, their role in the document. Okay? Okay. Syntax, selector, and so on. So CSS, again, it's a standard, okay? W3C recommendation. Okay, we are at version 3, which is, again, is like HTML5. There will be, well, there is sort of CSS4, but it's a living standard, okay, again. And also it has different parts and different stages for different parts. So there is some part dedicated maybe to animations, there is some part dedicated to images, to layout, and so on, okay? And so things are becoming more and more complex, and also support from browsers, as with the HTML5, depends a lot on the fact if the feature is useful and if the feature is too new, and so you need to have a new version of the browser or not, okay? But, let's start with the basics, CSS syntax. Well, again, CSS is a set of rules written in plain text. Plain text, very easy. Use a text editor. CSS is based on rules. Rules have two parts. One is, the first part is the selector, and the second part is the declaration, one or more declaration. The selector is a specific element that we will discuss more in a minute, and the declaration is a set of rules included in the curly brackets, okay? For instance, here you see the selector. You guess this applies. Selector means apply only to H1 elements in your HTML document. And the declaration says, well, make the color blue and the font size 12 pixels, okay? Of course, these properties are all specified in the standard, okay? So, group of selectors, a group of rules, and so on, okay? General syntax. But we have a tree in the browser. So the HTML has been parsed, and we have a tree, the DOM tree in the browser. So to which elements do the CSS rules apply? Because, of course, if we are on a leaf at the end, fine, it applies to that element. But if we are like here, not in the root, but in the middle of the tree, like table, do the rules apply only to table? Are they inherited by children? Does it make sense to make them inherited by children, and so on? Well, we need to solve these issues. Well, actually, styles, so rules in general, are inherited along the tree. to the children until the leaves of the tree. Okay? If this makes sense, 95% of the time it makes sense. Okay? Like body, color green, okay, everything is green below body. Okay? Or we have UL, so the list, an ordered list, everything is green in the list. Fine. So that's why it's called cascading, because like the rules cascade goes down until the leaves of the tree. Okay? And also there are different styles that also have the same approach. I mean, you can have rules in different places. And so making them inherited along the tree lead us to a question. What happens if two rules are in conflict? Well, the general rule in CSS is that the innermost rule is the one who wins. Okay? So like here, when two rules are in conflict, the most specific wins. Here, you have the tree, it says everything is green, but H1, it says red. So this one is more specific because it applies to a subset of the tree. So it wins over the general one that applies to the rest of the tree. Okay? So in short, you don't have to solve the conflicts. They are solved automatically by CSS. Okay? There are 200 plus properties in CSS. Okay? Most are quite maybe exotic in the sense that is everything working, right? Here. Just let me make sure your colleague can see. Yes, we stay here. Okay. So mostly are about presentation issues like say alignment, background, column gap, page break, spacing, and so on. Okay. So a lot of them we will have a sort of set of categories in a minute, and these rules sometimes require to specify values, and we can have different type of values. Okay, numbers like columns, 2 columns. Okay, or measurement, as we said before, font size 12 pixels. Okay, so we need to understand what pixel is, or a percentage. You have columns, I want 60% first column, 40% the other column, okay? Enumerated options, strings, sometimes you have like the display we said before, it's inline block, these are the 2 values, or colors. Often you want to specify colors. People like changing colors for the exam, okay? Sometimes it's even required. Okay, and for each property, the specification says, is it inherited along the tree? Most of them are. And to which element this can apply, okay? So there are maybe rules that cannot be applied to certain elements because it doesn't make sense, in short, okay? Border radius, maybe there is no border, okay? And so on. So, categories. Animation, background, border, color, dimension, layout, and so on. Okay. Table properties, for instance, apply only to tables. Text property, transform property, and so on. A lot of them. Okay. Of course, we don't want you to learn all this stuff, and in the end, we will try only a few very simple rules because sometimes you might have the need to write a rule in CSS. Okay. So you need to be able to write at least a very simple rule in CSS. But then, as we do with HTML, well, not with HTML, with the JavaScript, for the client part, if we use a library which is React, we will use a sort of library also for CSS for styling the whole application, because CSS is quite difficult nowadays to use directly, okay? With good results, of course. I mean, just make one thing red is very easy, okay? But having a consistent style and so on is quite complex. Okay, so just some information about most important things like units, okay? You have absolute and relative units. Most common fixed unit is the pixel that we already saw, okay, 12 pixels, the font size. But it's not really good because sometimes we want to have relative sizes because you want to resize, be able to resize the window, okay? So if everything stays the same, it's not convenient because you would like to shrink or enlarge things in the window, right? So, you know, sometimes specifying pixels directly or fixed units is not so good, okay? But again, I don't want to spend too much time on this. You can specify relative units when it's needed, okay? RAM relative to the viewport, that means the current size of the window or the browser, and so on, okay? So prefer relative units to absolute ones when possible because resizing is made easier, okay? When you have more, when you would become older, like me, I mean, you want to have things which are larger, right? Nowadays, websites like to have large fonts, large items, and so on. But then you want to have the same website also for the mobile, as a smaller screen, different way of layouting things, and so on. So having relative size, of course, helps a lot, okay? So typically nowadays, like for fonts and other sizes, you use RAM relative to the font size of the root element, so you can also change it through the browser, okay? Okay, good. So units, that's all, okay? Selectors. Selectors, we saw the element selector, so the name of the tag. But there are many different ways of writing selectors in CSS. In particular, the first two are the most common ones. Class selector. You remember the class attribute that can be used on any HTML tag. We can write class selector with a dot syntax. Okay, dot something, that's a name that we use as the value of the attribute class inside the HTML. ID selector with the hash, we say that what follows is the value of the ID attribute of some element inside the HTML, okay? And then there are other two types of selectors, attribute selectors, more advanced, so basically you can specify any attribute, or the pseudo selector that is very useful for states, especially for elements that can change states. Typically, classical example is the link. Clicked link has a different color than the never click the link. When you hover over an element, so you move the mouse over an element, it changes the color. That's a pseudo selector, okay? Pseudo state. Okay, good. So, example, H1, color red, fine, okay? But we say, don't write it inside the HTML. Write it into a separate file. So, how do we use this separate file? Okay? Now we will see, okay? Note that .css is just for convenience, like .mjs, .html, and so on. All text files. You can just use a text editor and edit whatever you want, okay? So, we write something like this, .blue text, that's a class selector because it starts with a dot. There's a rule, very simple rule, color blue. In the file style CSS, that we will need to link to the HTML document in a minute. But then it applies to all elements like P, H3, whatever, that has class equal to blue text, okay? The string that we defined here. And we decided ourselves the name of the string. Of course, try to make it unique in your document. Otherwise, you have two classes with the same name, and one of the two should prevail on the other. But I mean, that's not a situation that we want, like with the IDs. Okay? What's the difference between the ID and the class? The ID typically, yes, is here, is applied to only one element inside your document, the HTML document. While the class, being a class, being a style, it's a style that can be applied to many elements inside your document, okay? Like the style sheets, okay? It's a styling that is not specific to a single element, but to a class of elements, okay? So a set of elements that share some properties. Okay, all the attribute selector. I don't want to go into so many details here because you know, these slides are here for reference, mostly for reference. Pseudo classes are useful because, as I told you, there can be different states depending on what's happening inside the browser window, like typically the links, over, active, visited, and so on. And you can define different colors, but also different styles and so on. Okay, that's how you make some text being underlined when you move with the mouse over the text. Okay, so you have a over. I don't remember the property. It might be font underline true. I don't font face underline. I don't remember. Sorry. Okay, but these are the pseudo class selector. This makes things simpler in very common cases. You move the mouse around and you can get these events without writing JavaScript code. That would be heavy. Okay. Okay, you can combine selectors. With a comma, it's a union. Without anything is the second nested inside the first, and then the other ones are more specific. Okay, direct children, sibling, and so on. Okay, try not to use too much these things because they become complex to maintain. So you remember when you write, and after a few days you don't remember what you did. Okay, but I mean it's like code, right? Okay, display property. That's very important. Okay, because the property allows to control the way in which elements are visualized. Each element has a default display property, either inline or block. Okay. Yes, inline means it's rendered left to right, and if the line, if the row goes at the end of the window, it goes to a new line and goes on, like the text, a normal flow text. Block, it's like a box, and every box that precedes another is over in terms of the window. So every new box starts a new line and creates a new space. Okay, and but we need to practice a little bit with these properties. I think yes. But then we will try something in a couple of slides. The display properties also allow you to hide things in the page. Okay. Display none. Okay, the element is hidden and the page is displayed as if the element is not there. Okay, or the proper visibility can hide an element, but the element is still takes up the same space as before. Okay, so it doesn't affect. Sorry, it still affects the layout. Okay. Let's just practice a little bit, otherwise it becomes so boring, right? So we have the page, right? We have the page, and actually we play directly here because you don't just have the possibility to modify the HTML on the left. You also have the possibility to play with the CSS and the stuff on the right, right? Okay, so like let's play with the TR, right? Element, so display, okay, we said none, right? Okay, it disappeared, right? You can play with this stuff, okay? You can even modify pages like the Politecnico, whatever website you want, but of course it's just for you. It just acts locally inside the browser, so you can play with I mean, play is fun, but you can understand what's happening in terms of CSS and so on, okay? But you saw that this is blocked, right? Normal. Okay, you see that when we write none, okay, basically the lines goes up because the element doesn't take place in the layout. If we say visibility hidden, right? Hidden, it says well, none doesn't exist. See, there is still the room for the element. Sometimes you want just to hide it in the interface. Oh, by the way, we are in the cybersecurity course of study. If you hide stuff in the interface, but it's still there in the HTML, remember that anybody can go and see your HTML with the browser, directly requesting the HTML, and so on. Okay? So it's like when they do the PDF and they want to delete something, right? They put the black boxes, but they forget to delete the text from the document, right? So, you know, just don't incur in these errors. But I mean, just leaving these things aside, okay? So you see that you have a lot of properties, and here basically we are directly playing here inside the browser, so we don't really need to have a selector because the selector is what we clicked on the left, okay? If we want to add rules, we need to reference from the file outside rules, okay, written in an external file. I think it's somewhere here in the slides. Yes. Okay. Yes, just here. Okay, so these are the pseudo selector. Okay, we don't. I mean, you can play with them, but I mean, of course, we had not that much time. Cascading also means not only that you inherit properties over the tree, but the document can include more than one style sheet. Okay, the browser default style. It's already loaded in the browser. Basically, that's what we are seeing now in the example we have. We have no styles, so that's the browser default style, typically quite ugly. Then the external style means a file with the rules. That's what we are going to do in a minute. Internal style usually in the HTML add section. So we have another usage for the add section, metadata, but also styles. Not recommended anyway because we are already inside the HTML document. And then there is the inline style inside the HTML tag with the style attribute, the one we saw before. Okay? Especially this one's not recommended because it kind of pollutes the HTML document a lot. And this is the order of priority. So inline style has priority over everything, internal style over the external files, and so on. Okay? So external style, link to an external style using the link element done in the head. Okay? So we do it. We do it now. Okay. Internal style. Okay. Link. Oh, no select. Copy. Paste. Okay. Head. Okay, link, rel style sheet, type text CSS, href style CSS. I already have a file, style CSS, okay? Couple of rules. H1, background color light green. Dot yellow, so class selector, okay? Yellow, okay? Good. Let's see what happens. Reload the document, okay? H1, you see, the browser shows in style CSS line 3, there is a H1 rule, background color light green, okay? And then we didn't use the class selector, right? So tr, I think we can modify it, the class, what was it? What was in yellow, okay? Out of fantasy, right? So yellow, or we can do the same from okay, you see the yellow, okay? We use background color just because it's easier to see, okay, just to play. We could use the font color, etc. Okay, so how do you use it? Simply you write the CSS and then you modify your document accordingly. Okay, if you want to have it permanent, of course, you need to modify your HTML. Okay, so just test it. Reload. Okay, good. So not so difficult to use, right? Okay. We can have the internal style, so open a style tag directly in the header, but again, not so much recommended, or use the inline style equal to. Note that in this case, there is just the rule, not the selector, because we are inside the tag, so it applies only to that tag. Okay? That's the only thing we need to know here. Priority rules. I mean, priorities is difficult in CSS because there is this cascading system, but also you can make rules with higher priority, like exclamation mark important changes the order, okay? So even if it's external, so in the external CSS, it gets priority and so on. I mean, we try not to use all this stuff, okay? Try to stick to the default of the library we are going to use because we don't want to spend time uselessly on these things, okay? And nowadays, maybe AI and this kind of system, the design website, could be very useful to design the user interface, okay? You have an idea, you want to have, let's say, 3 columns, one thing on the left, one on the right, one in the center, and the center has to be highlighted in a certain way, and so on. You tell, and maybe they do a good layout, okay? Especially if they are specialized tools. So no need to waste resources and use your brain to do all these things. Just be aware of the fact that the layout and the appearance is just the result of applying a set of rules written by you or typically by somebody else to the HTML document. Okay? Okay, so just a few things, a few important concepts you need to know, because also for using those libraries, those already prepared classes and so on, you need to have a little bit of basic concepts to understand how they work. So one of the basic concepts in CSS is the box model. Okay, so each element, every element in the page is considered to be a rectangular box that has some properties. In particular, it has a content, so where things appear. Then it has a padding, a border, and a margin. Okay? Which by default they might be 0 in terms of size and transparent in terms of color. That's why you don't see them often, okay? But you want to maybe increase the padding to make room around the element, okay? So that it doesn't touch other elements in your page because you like it in this way, okay? And vice versa, okay? So, of course, the total element width and so on depends on the size of the padding, border, margin, and so on. But I want to show you that in the browser, you might have seen this on the right. There is the box model as well. Okay, so very easy to see, debug, and use. Okay, like for instance, here we are in the TR. What can we do? Border 1. Okay, 1. Not sure if, yes, we need to have a color probably. Border, color, black. It's not working. Probably TR doesn't support these things very well. It doesn't. Let me guess if this element instead. Yes. You see the border now, okay? Depending on the element where you are, some of the things might be supported or not, okay? As we say, there are a lot of properties that applies maybe only to certain elements or not, okay? But you can play with these things. Play, and also you need to know, because sometimes maybe the library, the system that you use, it says, okay, do you want a border or not? If you want, apply this class to your element. And you need to know what the border is. But border is quite simple concept, like padding, for instance. You want the right padding, you want the left padding, you want the padding around the whole object, and so on. Okay, so you need to have an idea what the padding is. Okay, good. Okay, and then we come to the more difficult thing, because until now, basically, we played with single elements, right? We said, okay, red, yellow, green, border, and so on. But then these elements have to be put into the page. And I already told you there's a default mechanism to lay out things in the page. We say block, that's a block, and another block, a new line, another block, and so on, or inline, one after the other, like the text. Okay? And but then we have an image, and we want it to have the image surrounded by text, as it happens sometimes in documents and so on. Or maybe we have other elements that we want to move around inside the page. Can we do it? Yes, we can do it, but it's was at least very complicated. Okay? For instance, the CSS started with this float model. We just give you some hints of what it was. It's still supported. Okay, because if we don't support it in browser, some older website will break. Okay, it will not lay out correctly. Then they invented this grid system, then this flag system, and then basically we are going to use a framework that basically has classes. We apply some classes to the elements we want to lay out, and more or less they go in the place where we want. Okay, of course there's maximum flexibility is here on the left. And the least flexibility here on the right, but this framework is constructed well. I mean, limitations are typically not so strong for us, and we can achieve more or less what we want. Okay, so just have a look at the CSS positioning schemes. Okay, so well, before talking about floats, okay, we need to know that CSS has 4 words that are important for the positioning. Static means it's a normal flow. If you don't do anything, that's a place where the element ends up with the normal layout of the browser. Relative is when we went on offset with respect to the previous static position in the so-called normal flow. Absolute is relative to the containing block, okay? And fixed is fixed to a reference point, typically the viewport, so the window, okay? So all the advertisement that stays there, and when you move around in your web application, it means in the website and so on, always stays in the corner and so on. They are styled with a fixed. They are anchored to the viewport, okay? So they don't move, regardless of where you are in the document, okay? Just to tell you, okay, that these things are important to do layouts in special occasions, okay? We are using a very simple approach, and we will try to use the normal flow as much as possible and try not to have difficult layouts, because we don't want to spend time on these things. We want to focus on how web application works, designing APIs, think in terms of security, and so on, okay? Okay, so that's an attribute. So position, you can decide which position it has, and depending on the position, you can specify other attributes, left, top, etc., okay? Z-index as well. Things might overlap. So this property decides which thing is shown. So the advertisement is always over all the rest, right? Okay? So that's the so-called Z-index, so the third dimension. Okay? It's a property that you can set. Okay, so that's the basic. And then you have the floats, just for completeness, difficult to use, not recommended for labs, for the exams and so on. Don't use it. But just I mean, the concept. Basically, you have elements that you want to float around in the page, okay? As if it was a sea, some water, and they are floating around. And the properties that you give to these floats determine where they end up in the page, okay? Because they are floating around. Like you push them, one you push it to the right, the other you push it to the left, the third you push it to the left, and it will touch the other to the left, and so on, okay? So left, center, align, and so on, okay? Often used for images and so on, and you need I mean, you have a lot of properties which are difficult to understand because, you know, when you have complex layout like this, you should say, okay, one to the left, one to the right, and then the center should stay to the left, but should expand until the right, and so on. All this difficult stuff that, I mean, it's difficult to use. And they actually recognize it was difficult to use. And in the end, over time, the specification evolved and introduced different ways of doing the layouts, right? So basically, we're going to skip all the slides. I know, I hope you didn't print the slides, right? So it's just a few bits more. But in case you need this concept, at least you saw it once. And you see, typically you use ID selectors, right? Because you have one float, it has an ID, and you want to address that float and specify some properties for that float, okay? Okay, okay, for the float, I think that's all. And then people realized, well, using float is so difficult. Can we do something easier? And yes, they did for the CSS. Again, just for completeness, quite difficult to use. So, layouts. Well, let's divide the space we have into a grid. Okay, and decide that some elements takes one or more of these blocks inside the grid, single elements inside the grid, or maybe more than one. Okay, like on the top left we have AA. It uses 2 elements. Okay, so first thing you need to define that the layout you are using. It's a grid layout with the property of CSS, and then assigning information about the number of grid columns, grid rows you want to use. Okay, so again, we're not going into the details here, but basically it says display grid, okay? So grid columns, that's the size of the 3 columns, and that's the size of 3 rows. You see there are 3 columns, 3 rows. And you can mix up the values in a very complex way, fixed values, relative values, and so on, okay? And basically you specify the position in terms of grids for each element you want to use. Okay, good. Some reference in case you really want to use grids, but I don't recommend it. Flexbox. Flexbox is more interesting because it's also quite well supported from the library we are going to use, that is Bootstrap. Okay, there are a few slides on that. Flexbox is the evolution. It should be simpler to use than floats and grids. Okay. So Flexbox has only 2 types of boxes, containers and items. So I define a container as saying that its display is flexed, so not more block or inline, flex, okay? So everything that is inside becomes a flex item. And I can specify, direct child is a flex item, and then I can specify intuitive properties of these items to align them as we like, okay? Like we can specify the alignment, the direction, the order, the size, and so on, okay? Like justify content center, okay? Just go into the center. Space around, space between, and so on, okay? And basically, it rearranges the items in a way that is more or less what you would expect from the name of the property that you pass to this the name of the value that you pass to this justify content property. Okay? Center, start, end, space around, so more or less in the middle, space between, aligned on the right, left and right. Wrap, okay, go to a new line if needed. How to align content, okay? Row, column, equal flex, unequal flex, you want a box which is bigger than the other, you can do that, okay, with the weight and so on. Okay, grouping, you can group them, you can group flex item, how? Using the div, you know, that tag that we saw that is basically has no meaning except the meaning we assign, and it's not shown. So it's not a box that is actually shown in the interface, but it's very useful because here we can group elements and we make the div a flex container, and so we can start again. Okay, nesting flex container. That is more intuitive than using those floats that we saw in the beginning. Okay, so that's just a summary of the CSS flex box. Okay. Again, we are going very, very fast on this stuff because, I mean, sometimes you might want to use them for very, very specific cases. When you, the library that you're using doesn't give you the behavior that you really want to use. Okay? Just references, etc. Just a few words about responsive layout and responsive design. You know that nowadays we use websites and so web applications on different devices. Okay, typical case: laptop, tablet, and mobile phone. Different sizes, even different orientation. You typically don't use the mobile phone in horizontal way, right? You use it in vertical way. Okay, so you need to have a layout that works in any case. If you don't want to serve a different website for each different device, of course. That's a possibility, but it duplicates, it triplicates the work, right? And so responsive design can be done through CSS because CSS basically can sort of apply rules conditionally depending on the media and depending on the size of the window, okay? Again, quite difficult to use from scratch. But what you need to know is that you can design rules that applies only to certain types of window sizes, viewport sizes, that's better, and media types. You can even have CSS for printed layouts, okay? So I have a CSS that applies rules only when you print the stuff, just to tell you. Okay? So what you see on the desktop in a way like this, because you have a lot of space, horizontal space, might end up in a vertical layout in a mobile setting, okay? Tablet is more or less in the middle. And so, this is just for completeness, just to tell you how difficult it is layouting things nowadays that you have different devices with different viewport sizes and so on, okay? So, this is not required for the exam, by the way. We use for the exam, we will tell you again, but I mean, we expect to use a viewport which is not too small. I mean, not like a vertical viewport. I mean, not really 4K screen, okay? But let's say reasonably, I mean, a screen with a width that is reasonably big, okay? So that's this case, okay? But if you want to play a little bit, and libraries mostly support this behavior out of the box, you can try to play a little bit. Okay, so the message here is CSS is very, very powerful, but very, very difficult to use, okay? And so what happened in practice? In practice, people realized, developers realized it was very, very difficult to use. And so they try to develop some set of rules and libraries that can be used easily with very good defaults, okay? And you just have to use some set of rules that works well together, and you use them with the class selector, applying the class selector to the elements in your HTML, wherever you need to use them, okay? So, there are different libraries and frameworks. We are going to see one which is called Bootstrap, okay? Which is a set of CSS rules, but also some JavaScript, okay? Because not all can be achieved through pure CSS, okay? Sometimes to get some behaviors like opening some elements and so on, you need a little bit of JavaScript, but it's already been written for us. The good thing is that it's open source. It was initially developed by Twitter, okay, the former Twitter, now X. Apply a modern style with sensible and nice looking defaults. takes care of cross-browser issues. When we have more than one browser, there is always the issue that some browser might not interpret the rules exactly in the same way, even though there is a standard. But I mean, we cannot really change the minds of people and companies, right? It has a simplified layout model, okay? And here you find the link, of course. And let's see what's the minimum that we need to use it. Okay? So, basically, it defines a set of classes. Okay? Bootstrap is a set of classes. So, it decided the name of a set of class selectors inside the CSS that you import when you want to import Bootstrap in your application. Okay? And some names are base, so they are common styles. They refer to the type of element that you want to use, like the accordion is the stuff that opens and closes, btn is the button, and so on. And then you can use modifiers, okay? Typically to change the color, to change some behavior, and so on, okay? And it handles everything: layout, content, force, component, and helps you with some utility functions and so on. It also gives you access to some of the features of the layouting that we saw before. For instance, there are classes that makes an element behave like a flex container and so on. Okay, but that's a bit advanced. Okay, use it only if it's needed. How do we use Bootstrap? Well, we just import the CSS. It's just a CSS file. And I told you it's a JavaScript file, so we need to import the CSS, the JavaScript file as well. Okay? It's just here, right? Get Bootstrap, same as before, just here. Okay? You just copy paste this, at least for now. Okay? And then later on in the course, we will import Bootstrap because it's been developed as a package as well when we are developing in React. Okay? So we copy to the clipboard, and basically, yes, that's the example that we have. I think it's the same, right? Yeah, it's basically the same, okay? I just updated to the latest version, but I mean, 5 dot something is already okay, okay? So, save. Let's test how it appears, okay? So, I think it's here, CSS, Bootstrap 5, right? Hello world. Of course, HTML is very simple, right? It's just H1, but you see the font, okay? Just you want to delete like the CSS, okay? Save, reload. That's the default of the browser, okay? I mean, I don't want to say it's bad, it's good, it's just a couple of words, okay? But, I mean, you import Bootstrap, and you get, of course, a default for the fonts, for all the things that you might need, but also for elements later on, for tables, etc. We are going to see them in a minute. Yes. So save and just reload. Okay. So one thing I want you to notice: we are in a cybersecurity course of study again. We just used resources from the internet. It worked because it downloaded 2 files from the internet. You see the URL. It is not localhost. CDN JDeliver net. Okay? Just for convenience. Our convenience, the user's convenience, it might have been already cached inside the browser, so you don't even have to download it. Okay? So it loads faster if you load it from a CDN. It means a server around in the internet that is close to the user. But there is the security issue. So how do I make sure that this file, the content that I'm downloading, has not been tampered with? So nobody has modified it in a malicious way, especially the JavaScript code. CSS code as well, because it can hide things and so on. Okay? So CSS is sort of dangerous as well. Well, oops. You see this integrity attribute. Use it. Always use it. Okay? If you change it, the browser will not load the file. I mean, it will load the file, it will complain. Maybe not directly to the user, but like you see here, B instead of A, save it, okay, reload, okay, it has been downloaded, you see, it has been downloaded, but if you go to that console, the hash doesn't match. I'm not using it. It doesn't match. I'm not trusting the resource, okay? And indeed, it has not been applied, okay? So let me undo it. Save. Okay, so don't forget to always use this, this integrity attribute, and to make it work, you need to have this cross-origin anonymous, which is a bit weird, okay? Because basically in older browser you loaded these resources without caring too much about security. In short, if you, I mean, not to break the older websites, browsers are more tolerant, okay, in this sense. And if you really want to have the hash checked, you need to also add this attribute cross-origin anonymous. But you are developing a new website, so it's not a problem, right? How do you compute the integrity? Well, of course, you can search in the internet, but I mean, we are in a cybersecurity course of study, right? We don't really trust this kind of approaches. This is the link that tells you how to compute the hash once you have the resource, okay? So you check the resource, everything is fine, okay, you compute the hash, and you're sure that the resource is what you expect. Okay. Yes, good. Oh, remember, there is the availability issue as well. If the CDN disappears, your site is broken. I mean, not broken in the sense that the content is not there, but the styling is not there, the layout is not there, so it's almost broken. Okay? So, of course, it's convenience, but it comes at a cost. You don't control this CDN server. If it goes offline, you can complain, maybe yes, it's free, so I'm not sure to whom you want to complain to. Okay, so the other option is just download it, serve it from your website. So it's always available, it's on your website. And by the way, in this way, you don't have the issue of the integrity, because it's served from your website, it's a resource from your website, so you control what is on your website. Okay? So two different approaches. But this is so common, I want you to be able to understand this issue. Okay? Layouting in Bootstrap, very simple. 12 columns. Each item has a specification that says how many columns you want to use. Okay? I know, it's limiting. We know, it's limiting. They choose 12 because you can divide it by 2, by 4, by 3, and so on. It's easy, right? And we know that you might want to have it a little bit more, a little bit less, and so on. If you want to play in this way with the layout, probably Bootstrap is not your choice, okay? You should use the flex and all the other approaches. But, I mean, for simple website like us, we don't really care about the layout, okay? Okay, we want one thing on the left, 3 columns, it stays on the left. The rest is 9 columns, it stays on the right, because we specified first the one with the 3 columns and then the other with the 9 columns, okay? Div class row, so you define your layout in a row and then you decide the columns and things stay there, okay? And then there is also a way of doing spacing. So this refers to the box layout, remember the padding. Otherwise everything is sticked together, okay? No borders, no padding, everything, you have 2 buttons, they touch each other, which typically is not that nice, okay? But in the beginning, we don't care that much, okay? And of course, these are just classes. There are a lot of classes in Bootstrap and in any library supporting CSS layout. You just need to understand how they work and try a little bit, okay? You just apply the classes that are appropriate for the element you are layouting or styling in your application. Okay? Tables and so on, there are classes specific for tables, etc. You can even have flex behavior. D something flex, and then you can use properties of the flex styling, flex layouting, okay? Even icons, okay? Let's just try something. Time is running out, but we still have, say, 3-4 minutes, okay? So, I'm just copy-pasting. Sorry for that, but no, I want to copy. Copy, paste, okay, page v3. So basically we added the Bootstrap CSS. Note that at the moment the JavaScript has to be added at the end of the body. We will talk about this next lecture, where to import JavaScript, what are the advantages, disadvantages of one solution versus the other, and so on. But you see these containers, container fluid, row, call 9, call 3, another row, ID is not used, class table, table of Bootstrap, okay? So, let's see how it appears. Here, page v3. You see? That is the Bootstrap layout, okay? This is a table, okay? Just check, okay? Table, where is the table? Okay, table. These are all the rules. See how many rules? They come in automatically using Bootstrap, okay? The top part, there was a row, call 9, call 3. You see? 9 and 3. Of course, it's a bit limiting, right? It's like we divided in 12 columns, but you see it's already, should be already responsive, right? So if you resize the window, it resizes and so on, okay? Yeah, even the default sometimes works, but you might want to use something which is a bit more advanced, okay? The default of Bootstrap is more than enough for our application, also for the exam. We don't really care about the appearance as long as you can see the thing, you can interact with the elements in a reasonable way, okay? Not one over the other, of course. But in general, there should be, I mean, using the Bootstrap styles, there should be enough, okay? You even have fonts, icons, and so on, okay? So just try this code. We don't have time. Of course, you need to import them, and we will be able to import them in React application later on. Again, same issues, okay? Remember the integrity and so on if you use the CDN. And you find these icons. There's hundreds of icons that can be really useful and easy to use and make your site immediately nice, okay? Okay, so in short, final note. When using a CSS framework like Bootstrap, try to avoid writing your own CSS rules as much as possible. Of course, I'm going to ask you, I want a text to be green, but not so green, but a little bit more towards yellow. Okay, you need to define your own color. Okay, write your own rule somewhere in a CSS. It's fine. There is the cascading style sheet system. So your rule has priority over the other, over the Bootstrap one. So if you really want to have a piece of text in a certain color, okay, it's fine to write your own rule. But, I mean, try to avoid using it for layouting. Layouting is difficult. Just stick to Bootstrap, 12 columns, or at maximum, try to use the flex. So class dflex, and then you have a flex container, you can play a little bit. But that's all, okay? Otherwise, you lose so much time around CSS. It's true you can ask ChatGPT and so on, but then if you have no access to the AI and so on, you have no idea where to put your hands and where you can do modification to improve things, fix things, and so on. Okay? So Bootstrap styling, color, themes are perfectly fine for this course, as well as for the basic UI elements. You saw the button I know the default style is blue button. You might not like blue. Doesn't matter, okay? Gray, we have different colors, a few of the most common colors, okay? That's fine. Just try and just use those colors. We don't really care if your button is blue, light blue, dark blue, and so on at the exam, okay? We care about the functionalities, the way in which the server and client talk, the APIs, the data exchange, the security, and so on, okay? Layouting is something we need to address because I will ask you, design an application to do this, and you need to design an interface, okay? But typically, an header, a menu where you have actions, and a main part, a body part, a content part, more or less address many cases. If you don't like them, maybe you need 2 columns, or maybe you need a new view, different page, that's just the column without a menu, okay? I mean, very simple layouts. Use all the columns, just use a few columns for one element and the rest for the others, and so on, okay? So I cannot really see situations in which you don't have the possibility to just use the defaults of Bootstrap, okay? Sometimes you have more complex structures, like here, we have a table. Okay, it's not forbidden to use a table. Just use the default formatting that Bootstrap gives you for the tables. Fine, okay? Okay, so I think unless you have questions, I think that's all for today. Just try to play a little bit with these classes, basically, because you need to write classes, okay? Div, so generic tags, blocks, even inline. You can use the inlines, especially for the fonts, okay? And do a little bit of layouting, and not this lab, but the next lab will be about designing your first interface, client side, for showing the films, okay, the list of films. Very basic, something very similar to what we did here for the list of answers, okay? Okay, if you have questions or comments, I'm glad to answer you. Otherwise, I think that's all for today, right? Okay, thank you. No questions, right?